All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Stephen Shortt. And Stephen, welcome. So awesome to have you with us today. And
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
yeah. And I'll tell you, I got to give a quick shout out to Andrew Ailman. Andrew runs this thing called Podcast Guests. I am on his list. I get a couple emails a week from him with potential guests. And I've met a number of an amazing guests, such as yourself, Stephen, as a result of Andrew. And I've never met Andrew personally. I've communicated with him a lot via email, but I'm incredibly grateful for just the role he's been holding in my life, especially hosting this podcast. So, Stephen, what I'd like
Fantastic.
to do is I'd just kind of like to start off by setting a little bit of context and letting people know a little bit about who you are. So we'll just kind of, give you an opportunity to share a little bit of your background, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you get to do. And we'll just start there, Stephen.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I'm Stephen Shortt. I'm from Dublin in Ireland. I've grown up in two family businesses, bought both of them, sold one of them just before COVID. So I've been through, I've been through the ringer of nearly walking away from family business because of interpersonal conflict and kind of not being able to see eye to eye, and knew that was the last thing I wanted when I said it out loud for the first time, that I got to leave the family business or my kids will never see their grandparents because we won't be able to be in the same room as each other. That's when it really hit me that I need to figure out a way of not allowing that to happen. So figured out a routine, and now I'm delighted to say 13 years later, well, it was probably about 10 years later after this, we all are now living together in the same home. When my wife and I refurbished my family home, my parents and my wife and my kids and I, we all live in the same house, the separate parts. So parents have their own kitchen and living room and everything else, and we live upstairs. But if you'd said that to me 10, 12 years before that, I would have said there's no way we can't even be in the same room, let alone living in the same house.
Wow. Well, that's quite an accomplishment for sure, Stephen. And so now you help other entrepreneurs navigate this and allow families who have businesses together to keep their relationships. And those are important relationships. We just allow them not only to keep their business intact, but to keep their family relationships intact as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when the current generation comes to a certain point in their career, whether that be that they're looking to retire or they're looking, or something happens and they have an illness or suddenly pass or something like that, there are four things realistically that can happen to a company at that point when the founder or the current generation is deciding it's time up. One, the business can stop. So there's four S's. The first S is stop. So business, just the shutters come down one day and that's it. It's never opened again. That is my second least favorite way of dealing with a family business. Mm-hmm. The second S is sell. There are plenty of private services companies that can help you with tax and valuations and legal things and everything else. And if it's time, there's nobody else in the family, there's nobody else in the next generation who wants to take it on, sell it, get the cash, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Mm-hmm. That is my second favorite way of dealing with a family business.
Okay.
The third S is survive. Now, survive is when the current generation just puts in a kind of a placeholder leader, somebody who doesn't really feel the passion for it, is just there not to rock the boat and keep things going along. And the business survives and trundles on for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. This is my least favorite option because realistically, the market, the competitors, and everything else is going to start catching up and overtaking. And survive is just a long, painful stop. Yeah. Because over time, it's going to go down, and it's going to cause untold heartache. Mm-hmm. My favorite S is scale, to put the right people in the right seats to be able to scale the business through the generations. To have people, whether that's the eldest, the youngest, the cousin, the whatever, who's the right person with the right passion and the right skills to be able to see us through the next chapter of the family business.
Very good. Wow, what a great description there. And I I would imagine that, you know, anybody you're talking to that has a family business, you start talking about that kind of stuff, and they start seeing like, oh, where are we? And obviously, Stephen is a guy who gets this and might just get us too. And so, yeah.
Well, I mean, I've had plenty of challenging conversations, I can tell you. So I was just talking with somebody last night. Yesterday evening I had a call, and he is fourth generation with 8 cousins, all involved in the business, and
Wow.
figuring out how to structure it, because they didn't have like the previous generation. Now they're all the current generation now, but the previous generation are still alive, not active in the business. They never put like structure or governance or anything like that on it, and it's just who's the elder, who's and this vying for position in a really large company. I mean, if there's 8 family members, it would have to be a fairly big company.
Yeah.
So we've been discussing like what kinds of things we can do to put trusts in place, to maybe have some kind of a charitable organization to have the same impact, but then putting in a board of, or at least getting a couple of non-executive directors to put some governance, to put some structure and everything else on it. Because when it gets to that point, there needs to be you need to build a burning platform to be able to make any real change.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. You know, just hearing you, I don't have a family business. It's just me kind of doing my thing. But I do know people who have family businesses, and I've never myself personally given a whole lot of thought to like, wow, there's a lot of issues and a lot of things going on there for family, and just a whole different dynamic. And yeah, yeah. So I'm glad we got to have this conversation, because I do know that there are people in my, well, heck, I can think of people I've interviewed for this podcast that are involved in family businesses. And so, yeah. Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I'm gonna reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So have you, Stephen, ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Stephen, I'm just like really excited to hear you give you the opportunity to share your story and your experience around the most valuable relationships in your life and in your business.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as I said, this whole journey of the successful succession started for me when I said out loud for the first time I'd have to leave the family business, and that my relationship was kind of done with my folks. Because obviously, growing up, everybody's parents have an impact on their kids' lives, positive, negative, whatever. There's an impact. And I have to say, the visceral reaction that my body had, like every cell, every fiber in my being reacted when I said out loud, I need to leave the family business. And I knew this is not what I need to do. This is actually not the right choice for me. So going back and really addressing those relationships and being able to build on them, to be able to discuss them, to be able to discuss the differences, the different views, the different perspectives, the unconscious biases that we all have in life. About how we should do things and how risk averse we should be, or how much risk we should have an appetite for, and change and everything else. So to this day, so as I mentioned, we're all living together, and I spend a lot of time with my folks and getting their counsel and getting their advice and stuff. Ultimately, I make the decisions, but a huge amount of it is because I really value their opinion and their experience. There's some things like the technology side of things, so long as they get the concept of it, like anyway, there's some things that I still run by them and discuss with them.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, the other area, I mean, my wife is obviously vitally important to all of this, and acts as a sounding board, acts as a real weather gauge to see what am I doing, and if I'm caught in a loop on something, we can talk it out. We go walk the dog and kind of talk it out, and it's been, I mean, truly life-changing having met my wife, for the better, I would add. But for me, from a business point of view, so I'm a member of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization of business owners who own and operate their own businesses or own their own businesses. I think it's 200 chapters around the world, 17,000 members. I'm very active in this. I have a forum. I have international people and mentors and mentees that I've connected with over the last 10 years through EO, and all those relationships have really impacted me on having the confidence to be able to live remotely, to be able to live away from my business a good 6 years ago, before COVID made everybody work away from their business, from their office. Being able to put those structures in place, and then ultimately deciding to sell that business and move on to the next bit. So there's been an awful lot of those conversations, and that it's something which I found, I suppose, my tribe in EO, in the Entrepreneurs Organization, and the people who think like me and have similar values to me, to help everybody to learn and grow.
Very good.
So if I was to sit here and name all 17,000 members, this podcast is going to be a very long, boring podcast for the rest of it. So let's just say the EO network and the people in it. So
yeah, for sure. So if we look, I mean, you mentioned your parents, your wife, the EO membership, which is quite vast there. If you look at any given one of your relationships that you've had over the years, I would love to hear an example of a relationship where it empowered and allowed you to make a really large impact in the world somehow, that hands down would have never happened if not for your relationship with this person.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you one, which the thing that's jumping in my mind, the way that you're phrasing it, actually has nothing to do with business. It's about something else. So I have a sister who's not involved in family business. She's a social entrepreneur. She works with inner city underprivileged youth. She's done a PhD in how the media portrays people from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. She's a very smart lady and very passionate, is not driven at all by financial wealth, the financial success, or any of this. She just wants to make an impact. I always joke and I say that she is the socialist capitalist of the family, that she wants to change the world and make a bit of money, whereas I'm the capitalist socialist. I want to make a bit of money and save the world. So we kind of have similar views on a lot of things, but we do differ on a lot of other things. So there's, I'm sure in most families, there's siblings who don't necessarily share the same opinions on everything. But we were out for dinner when my daughters, who are now 16 and 13, were probably about 6 and 5. So probably about 6 and 3, probably about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember we were all there. It was my wife, my mother, and my sister's partner all have birthdays around the same day, like within 2-3 days of each other. So we were all out for a big family dinner for everybody. And the girls were there, and they were coloring in on the little placemats in the restaurant that we were in. And I had made some silly joke at the time. And because I've grown up with my mother and my sister, I've always said I'm not sexist, which means I'm allowed to make sexist jokes because it's obviously a joke. I'm obviously not serious. I obviously don't mean it because I work side by side. And I was making a silly joke, and it was something about, we'll have to find them a good husband or something stupid like that. And my sister turned and she said something to me about internalizing. And I remember thinking, oh, she's getting so into this PhD thing. It's this, just let me have some fun at dinner. Like, stop annoying me. But whatever way she said it, it caught my attention, and I listened to what she said. And she basically said, when you joke about things and when you have those comments all the time, people who hear them start to normalize that as truth, and they start to have self-limiting beliefs. And it made me look at my girls, and it really dramatically affected how I use language and how I use humor and how I use everything else, because I was looking at them going, what if I, as their father and the supposedly the role model for males in their lives as they're growing up, what they should be expecting from men, what they should be expecting from half the population of the planet, whether they're straight, gay, whatever, that if my jokes are always saying, well, you're only girls, you'll never accomplish anything. If that's an underlying belief that they then internalize because their father, the patriarch of the family, makes those jokes, that they then start to limit themselves. And within 30 minutes of the dinner, like my whole perception of life and everything had shifted on me. I said it to her years later, and she doesn't even remember the comment, because it was like we had those kind of conversations all the time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But whatever it was in that day, and I still remember as clear as day to today, it had a dramatic and profound effect on me and how I talk about people, how I make, like I used to make a lot of self-deprecating jokes. I still do from time to time, but not nearly to the extent. And I definitely don't make jokes disparaging other people anymore, even in a jokey way or an undermining way, that I always got away with, because Irish charm will let you get away with an awful lot of stuff in this world. But the idea that would be leaving little scars horrified me so much that it really impacted, it really changed how I view things. And like as a side project, around that time as well, I set up a couple of years before I'd set this up, but I made a video actually about this topic called feministfather.com.
Okay.
So I set up as a side website where I was then starting to collate things that I found online to share with the girls about, look, these are role models that are not vacuous pinups that are only valued for their looks or something like that. So. Wow. So that was when you said that. So that was a relationship. And I mean, my sister and I, we still we get on very well, but then there's some things that we just don't see eye to eye on. And there's a phrase that I use a lot for family businesses, which is blood is thicker than water, but it boils so much faster. So family has a way of just getting under your skin that other people just don't get anywhere close to. So, I mean, we can trigger each other. We can set each other off sometimes, but we're able to have these conversations and share our differences, which I think is really important. And it's important for the girls. It's important for my daughters to hear both sides. It's not just me as an entrepreneur. It's also some of the stuff that I don't see on a day-to-day basis that my sister tells me about, but I know a little bit, but the girls can understand more.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many years ago was this conversation between you and your sister, Stephen? How many years ago was it that
it was probably 10 at this stage.
About 10 years
ago at this stage.
So I would imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that, you know, that conversation with your sister, because it was so impactful on you, it has in essence changed the way that you communicate with everybody in your life ever since that point 10 years ago.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, see, and this is why I love asking this question, because when we really start looking at stuff like this, you know, so this one incident between you and your sister, that you had this conversation that for you was just such a profound realization where it just offered insight that you didn't have before, that affected a change in you that has gone on ever since, and it been impacted every conversation that you've had since. And because of who you communicate with, I mean, all these EO members that you're in communication with, all of the clients that you serve, these other family businesses, that not like, if we look at the family businesses where you are working closely with these families, but because of the work that you do and because of the way that you show up now, I don't know how big some of these businesses are, but like you mentioned, you know, you got a business with eight cousins and stuff. Well, it's a pretty good sized business. And so that business is affecting a lot of people's lives as well. And even in that business, the team members, that they are being impacted and affected, and their spouses, their families, because when an employee or a team member is happy, or when they're unhappy, that stuff goes home. And make no doubt about it, those families are impacted one way or the other. And so when we really start looking at this, the impact of that one conversation between you and your sister, in essence, has impacted, I mean, who knows how many lives, but a lot of lives have been impacted because of that one conversation with you and your sister about 10 years ago. And that's powerful. That's powerful when we start thinking about that. And
absolutely.
So, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, Stephen. And for anybody listening to this that is thinking like, man, Kevin, I really like Stephen. I like what he stands for and stuff. And heck, it wouldn't surprise me if there is some family-owned businesses, that there are people involved in family-owned businesses that are listening to this. I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to any resources or websites that you have. I know you mentioned the one I didn't know, which I will include with the show notes, was the femininefather.com. I mean, would you like me to include that website with the show notes when we put?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So Feminist Father.
Oh, feminist. Oh, yep. You know what? I wrote that. I wasn't reading my writing well enough, but I did.
Okay.
I did write
That's
it down
right.
correctly. So.
Feminine Father feels like a different type of website.
That's right. You're right. That's got a different feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm on, for the family business stuff, it's successfulsuccession.com, helping businesses scale through the generations. And for me, I'm stephenshortt.com. You got a list of everything I'm involved in there.
Very good. Very good. Well, Stephen, any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
No, it's from the conversation that we've had pre-call and the before we started recording here today. It is it does make you think about how impactful individual conversations can be, that have these ripple effects out. So I think the stuff you're doing on the podcast here and helping people to acknowledge some of these powerful conversations that have affected your guests, that have gone on to affect other people, is a fantastic concept for a show. So well done.
Yeah. I will tell you, I've been an entrepreneur for years, and hosting this podcast has become one of the most rewarding thing I've done in my 27-year entrepreneurial career. And it's so much has come from this. And I want to thank you, Stephen, because like I said, one of my goals for this podcast is that the listeners, through just hearing what is talked about and what is shared, that it inspires them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And I have long believed that as entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset that we possess. And Stephen, with your help, we definitely delivered on that today. And so I want to thank you so much for your role in that. And I'm excited to share this conversation with other entrepreneurs and stuff. And so thank you again. Really appreciate you, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.